Campers, what is the most paranormal thing you saw? I was a cabin with 4 other people. I woke up at about 5 a.m., and they were all sleep talking at each other. Like straight up grunting, mumbling, shaking, and everything else a person mid-sleep would do. Only the 4 of them were actively engaging in some kind of primitive sleep talk at once and towards each other. It scared the shit out of me. In the morning, I told them about what happened, and they didn't remember a thing. What probably happened is one started sleep talking, and it set off the rest of them. Still WTF worthy, though. A few years ago, I was camping in the Everglades in Florida with a few friends. We all had gone into our separate tents and were starting to fall asleep. The area was pretty noisy with bugs, crickets, birds, etc. I heard this very low vibration, sounding almost like a low roar. It was powerful enough to vibrate in my chest. Suddenly, everything in the forest shut up. No bugs, no birds, nothing. About 30 seconds later, my phone vibrates, and it's my friend in the other tent texting me asking if I heard the same thing. The 4 of us kept texting each other, wondering what it was. About 10 minutes later, all the animals slowly started making noise again. I slept that night with my machete at arm's reach. Edit: a lot of people are saying it might have been a gator. We were in an elevated area that was far from any streams or ponds. It's possible there might have been a pond with a gator that we missed, but the very big ones tend to hang out in lakes. That was an alligator. I've been down there multiple times, and they make a deep, rumbling noise like that. 1984 to 85 time frame. It was a break from college, and a group of us decided to go on a week-long raft trip. The river went through a Native American reservation. The nights were clear and beautiful. The river was slow and manageable. Everything was going pretty well until the next to last night. We had finished dinner, put everything away. My travel mates had snuggled into the tents. I stayed outside to stargaze a while and try to identify different constellations because we had no moon. We were miles away from the nearest light pollution, and it was a gloriously clear night. When I saw it, at the edge of one horizon, huge, bigger than the moon, huge white light. It went across the sky, faster than an airplane, and disappeared below the far horizon. It took maybe 60 to 90 seconds to traverse the sky. I started yelling for my mates about 5 seconds after I saw it, and realized that it wasn't going away. I now realize that it was probably a meteor, but I would have followed it to Bethlehem. This happened to me when I was little. I went camping with my older brother and my mom. I was about 7 or 8, and I went to bed around 10 in a sleeping bag inside my tent with both my mom and brother. Sometime during the night, I don't know when, I woke up somewhere in the middle of the woods still in my sleeping bag. I had no idea where I was or where my tent was. I screamed for my mom, and I heard her calling back for me in panic, but she was easily 100 yards away or so. To this day, I have no idea how I ended up in the middle of the woods still inside my sleeping bag. Gives me the chills. Last summer, I worked at an overnight camp in northern Wisconsin that had about 300 campers and 80 staff. One night, we were woken up by a huge storm and the sound of lightning less than a mile from our cabin and wood cracking. After only 15 minutes, the storm died down, and we all went back to sleep. When we woke up, over 20 huge trees had been down many only feet from cabins with kids sleeping in them. If they had fallen 5 feet in the wrong direction, they would have killed multiple people. The only 2 buildings hit had no people in them, and they were destroyed. I still think about what would have happened if we had lost campers that night. A few years back, I hiked the Timberline Trail around MT, Hood in Oregon. On the second night, I camped out in this section of the woods that had been devastated by a forest fire the year before. That evening, as I was drifting off to sleep, this deep, guttural growl started to echo out from somewhere out in the woods. You know that sound a dog makes when you try to take a tennis ball from him? Kind of like that, but very low and very loud. I timidly poked my head out of the tent, feebly trying to suss out the source with my headlamp, but all I could see was the charred ruins of the forest in all directions. I crawled back into my sleeping bag, suppressed any desire to get up and pee in the middle of the night, and drifted off into a fitful night's sleep. It would be sometime later that I would learn that that deep, reverberating growl was actually the glacier on MT Hood, cracking under the summer heat. I'm not sure if this classifies as paranormal, but more glitch in the matrix. This was back when I was like 10 years old. So my family, along with extended family, went on a camping trip in an area that was fairly isolated. On the second day, we decided to go for a bush walk where we see a relatively older woman walking by. It's a public area, but regardless, seeing an older woman by herself on a walking track was kind of odd. Now, the paranormal part was as we were finishing the walk, we passed her by again. This wasn't possible as she was traveling in an entirely different direction. I was with 3 other people, but regardless, we were all stumped as to what happened. And to this day, we still don't exactly know how that happened. I honestly think there must have been an alternate path or something, but still pretty damn creepy at the time. Did this happen on the Appalachian Trail like 7-ish years ago? I had a very similar experience. Edit. This is important. Did she have a straw woven hat with a yellow ribbon around it? Camping trip with Boy Scouts. 1975 or 1976 in the Blackwater Forest in Florida. I woke up in the middle of the night to an eerie light filtering into the tent. Flipped open the tent flap to see the whole campsite flooded in a dull red light. Coyotes howling in the distance. My tent mates were all gone. The other tents were empty. I was sure I had died and gone to hell. Scared as hell, I went back to my tent and laid there for a long time, practically paralyzed with fear. Eventually, my friends all came stumbling back into camp from a nearby field where the scoutmaster had taken them to watch the peak of the lunar eclipse. I got teased a lot for refusing to wake up and go with them when they tried to wake me up. This story was told to me by my professor, who I very much trust. While he was camping and hunting in Montana, he had a strange vision. He was sitting on a hill looking for a deer to shoot, and out of the forest walks his elderly mother. He is taken aback because his mother lives in Slovakia and has never left her country. His mother says she loves him and walks away. At this point, my professor is freaking out. He packs up his stuff and goes back into town. He calls his mother overseas. She answers and laughs at his story. He still feels unsettled, so he gets a flight and flies back to see his mother. He spent a few lovely days with her. Then the morning before he's about to go home, he wakes up to find his mother passed away in her sleep. My professor grew up in war-torn Europe, escaped the Iron Curtain, lived as a street artist in Paris, and then became a 10-gallon hat wearer in Slovak in Texas. But somehow this story sticks out a lot when I think of him. Red Heart Rip. Well, I don't know how much I buy into paranormal explanations of things, but I have seen some strange lights in the sky on multi-day mountaineering/backpacking trips, especially in the deserts of West Texas, where the night sky can be oppressively clear. Not saying they were alien in origin, not by a long shot, but seeing as they were objects that were flying that I couldn't identify, they qualify as UFOs. We, as in my mountaineering partner/best friend, have heard some weird sounds in the woods in central Arkansas, too, but I don't buy into that being supernatural at all. He does, but he literally says, "I can't help it. I'm Mexican." You know how superstitious we are. I'm sure it's just animals making noises we aren't accustomed to. Not sure if this is paranormal, so our school had a trip to the Taman Negara rainforest in Malaysia. We slept in a bunk in some rundown dormitory on the first night when in the middle of the night, our bed started shaking for no reason. Out of the 8 double beds, about 3 shook. My class started waking up, light flicked on, and a commotion ensued. So then my class assigned 3 PPL to hold on to those 3 beds, so see what was the problem, and whether the story was legit. When the lights flicked back off, the bed started to shake again. The strangest thing was that my friend, who quickly reined to switch on the light, felt a pull on his shoulder, almost preventing him from running. Teachers were called in, but the problem wasn't resolved, so we resorted to sleeping on the floor. While on the floor, there was no shaking, but it was a long night of anxiety. An explanation would be good. So far, theories such as wind and an opposite class playing around aren't convincing at all, because there was barely any strong winds and the classes around us were all fast asleep. I don't know if this qualifies as paranormal. A friend of mine has huge farmland. We had set up a camp at his farm one summer night when we were teenagers. Only 2 of us. The next morning, we both woke up with scratch marks on our foreheads. Mine was more in the middle and his on the side. It's been over 10 years, but it still bothers me as to what could have possibly caused it, given there were no people or animals in nearby. A group of us were camping in a forested area a few years ago, and as is tradition, we would take our bathroom breaks to a safe distance from the camp to avoid smells and embarrassment. The only light we had was from a fire in the center of the camp and our phone torches. One of the girls went off into the forest and ran back screaming, saying that she'd seen a shady figure watching her as she went. A group of us then set off into the darkness with torches to try and find whoever it was. No sign, but spooked us all to hell and put a real damper on the night. Nobody likes the feeling of being watched. I went camping with my girlfriend back when digital cameras weren't a thing and we had to use disposable. We had a good time, took a lot of pictures on 3 disposables. We had a great time, 3 days of camping in a remote part of the state we're from. When we had the pictures developed, there were pictures of me and her sleeping at the 3 different campsites we slept at, and 1 picture of someone holding a knife to my throat. We never went camping again. Edit. I do not have the photos as this was so long ago. Sorry guys. I am so sick of this urban legend reposted as fact in these threads. Every damn time. FFS. Be more original if you're going to make shit up. Me and my friend were walking down a path alone in some woods when we heard some rustling. When we turned around, there was something running up a tree. This thing was completely black, as big as a person, and ran up the tree faster than a squirrel would. We hauled ass to the end of the path, and when we got back to tree, it was gone. Never saw it again. Me and 3 other buddies were camping on my property near the Suwannee River. The second night in, we were sitting around the campfire and heard this really loud growling. We were all a bit freaked out, but I wasn't too worried. I wasn't aware of any extremely dangerous animals in northern Florida. I took a flashlight and walked toward the growling. I followed it to the bottom of a hill, and my flashlight just died. I was in the middle of the woods at 11 p.m. on a new moon, no natural light. I just stood where I was trying not to move a muscle, and the growling got really close to me. I kept shaking the flashlight until it finally turned on. The growling completely stopped, and there was absolutely nothing there. I heard it about 2 feet from me, and it just disappears without a trace. The next day, my friends and I went to that exact area where I heard the growling, and there wasn't even paw prints, ruffled leaves, or anything. It was pretty creepy. We were camping one night, just hanging out, bullshitting, and having a few drinks away from civilization. It was pretty dark where we were, and you couldn't see very far past the fire. There was a large boulder no too far from our shelter. One of my friends went out to collect firewood when he heard voices near the rock, low like a whisper. When he came back and told us, we didn't believe him, so we went over and listened. It sounded like it was coming from inside the rock, just a series of numbers being repeated. We were spooked, but we all went to sleep eventually. It wasn't until later when we discovered Number Station and we all lost our collective shit again. I was camping by a lake with my boyfriend. I woke up in the tent in the middle of the night and heard footsteps and heavy breathing around my tent. So I woke up my boyfriend and he went outside to check it out. As soon as he went out, all the noises stopped. He said he saw nothing and came back in, but as soon as he laid down, it started up again. It was terrifying. We never figured it out. There were no trees. It was all sand and dirt for miles in a canyon. Nothing for anything to hide behind. And it sounded as if it was right outside. Super scary. I won't camp there anymore. The 3 of us ended up passed out on the porch, so it counts as camping. Anyway, about 3 in the morning, drunk, very drunk. We're chilling, shooting the shit, being everyday white trash drunks. All of a sudden, in the clearest possible enunciation, my friend's dog lifts his head and says, "Hello." Drunk, I know, but we all heard it clear as day. We just stared at each other for about 5 minutes before I said, "Did you just he?" Cut off by dog's owner, who says that didn't happen. Other friend, "It most certainly fucking did. Can your dog talk?" No. Based on his reaction, this had happened before, and he was clearly uncomfortable talking about it. So we did the only logical thing a person could do in that situation: get whiskey whipped. This isn't going to sound like much, but I was camping with my friend, I think it was on the west coast of Florida, and we saw this thing that was like, maybe dog-like, kind of raccoon-like, sort of in between, not really either. It wasn't a possum or a lemur or a fox or anything I could recognize, and I'm usually pretty good with identifying the native and invasive fauna. To this day, we have no idea what that creature was. If it was somebody's dog, they must have lost it because it just ran into the woods. Another time I was camping in the Everglades and found a trail off the campsite that was restricted access. My friend and I just walked along it for a really long time, late at night. It was pretty creepy. Eventually we came across an old abandoned amphitheater, and then just an outhouse in the middle of the woods. But nothing actually happened. Pretty anticlimactic, I guess. Coming back late, about 8:30 to 9 p.m., from a hike through a trail in the Smoky Mountains, my family and I see a car ahead of us. All mountain road, isolated except for an unmanned rest stop or 2 here and there. Only one road to take until you reach the next town on the other side of this particular mountain. Not familiar with the area, but this was near Sliding Rock. We followed it along the same mountain road for about 10 minutes or so, and it turned around a bend just enough ahead of us that it went out of sight. No car when we rounded the same bend. Shook us all. There was no means of parking on the side of the road at that point, cliff and intact guardrails. No rest stop, nothing at all. The car just plain wasn't there anymore. Dad even picked up speed, thinking maybe this guy got far enough ahead that he only looked like he vanished, but even on straight roads where we could see a good ways, we never saw the car again. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.